Freedom is an interesting concept, especially in the way it changes over time. As a kid, you have very few obligations outside of going to school, doing your homework, and probably some chores here and there. If you want to play video games all day during summer, you most likely would be able to do just that. In high school, we start thinking about the freedom of choice. Soon the world will open up, full of infinite possibilities and decisions to make. We can go out without telling anyone and stay up as late as we want with little consequence. The future seems quite bright. Of course, this perspective changes once we properly get out into society. Jumping into the adult world, there are countless expectations to keep up with. There's the initial move into a new place, followed by paying for rent, utilities, food, and whatever else we need each month. Getting around via car or other transportation is a whole other thing to worry about. By far the biggest factor to consider during our adult years is time. Previously, a few extra hours barely meant anything. Now, managing to get that much free time in a single day can be miraculous. This is almost always due to being stuck at work, and it's worse when you consider the likelihood of not enjoying the job. You could potentially pursue something else, but what if you don't even know what it is you really want to do? Everything is so unclear that you wish you could just make it stop for a chance to think. What if you were given the time to find an answer? With no real starting point and no clear direction, would you be able to figure things out before it's too late? Welcome to Solanin. Solanin is a 2-volume slice-of-life short story made back in 2005 by the very talented Inio Asano. Being his first official serialization, this was a solo effort, as he didn't have the money to hire any assistants. With his very limited resources, he chose to model the story after his then-current life. This setting involved the challenges and anxiety that came with being a working adult fresh out of university. Rather than the characters standing out or being flashy, they're just regular people like you and me. Doing her best in this environment, we're introduced to the first main character, Meiko Inoue. At 23 years old, she's been out of university for a while now. Working as an office lady, her job is unfulfilling to say the least. The adults around her give off selfish and self-serving impressions, and she can't help but go with emotions. Her paychecks are decent enough to keep things steady, made all the more necessary by her boyfriend Taneda's low-paying situation. He also plays in a band with his friends Kato and Billy, but that's also not doing them any favors financially. Despite her efforts, she's unable to really click with her surroundings, and it's starting to take a toll. Coming to Tokyo with her boyfriend, they were initially overwhelmed, but the possibilities back then seemed endless. Now, the sky that was previously so open and inviting feels completely suffocating. Full of uncertainty in her career prospects for the future, a dark voice starts to emerge from somewhere close by. Heading home early, she makes a passing remark about quitting her job, not expecting to be taken seriously. To her surprise, she's met with encouraging words. Taneda declares that no matter how bad things get, everything will manage to work out since they have each other. Amazed beyond words, Meiko is grateful to hear exactly what she needed. The next day, she turns in her resignation letter, ready to search for her next step. With nothing but time, Meiko embraces her new freedom. She takes advantage by doing a number of regular things, but after a week, she begins to notice something. Without anything to properly focus her efforts on, this freedom starts to feel a lot like boredom. Talking with her friend Ai about the situation, she's met with concern for her carefree attitude. Despite the list of extravagant goals she has, the reality is that her new independence is a little too much to handle. Her boyfriend has a similar reaction, not quite realizing what he said during his earlier half-awake stupor. Enjoying some time with her old university gang, she's able to relax for a little bit, but outside, Taneda voices his concerns about their future. He's understanding about things, but knows they don't have long for her to make a decision. Meiko's mother also voices her concerns during a surprise visit, leading to her daughter blowing up at her and running off. Her mom decides to let the two lovers handle things in whatever way they see fit, but Meiko still feels uneasy. Asking their friend Billy if he's happy and satisfied with his life, he He flips it around, saying she's really just asking that to herself. With her savings beginning to slip away, she knows that time isn't on her side. Ai starts to wonder if Meiko is testing her relationship with Taneda, also stating that maybe she can't make any progress because her goals are set too high. Meiko later takes a bit of time to reflect on her reasoning. She didn't necessarily quit her job because she disliked it. More than anything, she hated the idea of being stuck for too long. Likewise, she's not really testing Taneda. In fact, that's a topic she'd rather avoid due to her own insecurities. Showing some more personal insight, she knows just how hard it is to simply get by, let alone pursue dreams. With these thoughts in mind, Meiko asks Taneda about his job. Met with an honest answer, she starts to wonder if she's being fair about everything. Looking intently at her boyfriend, she springs an unexpected question on him. Knowing he loves music, she thinks he should give it a proper try with his band. Attempting to make excuses for why he shouldn't do it, Taneda is met with another push. Meiko doesn't want him to be scared of seriously pursuing something he enjoys. Even with these words, Taneda still questions what would happen after potential failure. Without giving an answer, he apologizes and heads out for some air. After considering his own options, Taneda decides to give his music a shot. Soon after, Taneda and his two bandmates start writing new music together. The goal is to get a small CD recorded, then send it out everywhere and hope for the best. Everyone is serious, and they're gonna give it their all. Thanks to Taneda's new burst of energy, Meiko is able to relax for the time being. Taneda later breaks the news that he also quit his job so he could fully focus on the band. If it doesn't work out after this recording, he's dissolving the group. Taneda has come to terms with it, but Meiko is understandably nervous. With the last rehearsal wrapping up, and Taneda at his happiest, Meiko thinks to herself that this is how things should be. The CDs get printed and shipped out to labels and venues, leaving the group to wait for the results. Celebrating with some summer fireworks on the beach, everyone enjoys a moment of peace. Thinking silently to herself, Meiko knows that this time is fleeting, only possible by ignoring their current reality. Vowing not to miss any more opportunities, this moment marks a turning point. Instead of wasting days away, they're going to start using them as a foundation for the future. Fortunately for them, they quickly get a call from a big record company. The reception to the CD was very positive, but for a different reason than what they're expecting. Instead of signing as a regular band, they're offered the position of backing band for an up-and-coming idol. She would do all the singing and performing, while the guys play her songs. The offer is laid out on the table, leaving Taneda to make the final decision. However, before he can say anything, Meiko refuses the offer herself. She later apologizes to Billy, but he figures they were all on the same page anyways. It seems this was the case, as Taneda thanks her while they're on the way out. Meiko hopes to herself that eventually they'll be able to look back on this day in a positive light. Unfortunately, that day might take a while to arrive. Summer quickly changes to fall, and the band doesn't get any additional offers. It's been 2.5 months since Meiko quit her job, and while she enjoys the comfortable laziness, she also remembers her lack of goals. Attempting to avoid stagnation, Meiko ends up hitting the same wall outside of the job that was assumed to be the cause. The demon that was lurking in Tokyo may have caused more problems than fixed. As the couple shares a quiet moment on the river, Taneda brings up the heavy topic of breaking up. He mentions moving back home for different work prospects and reaffirms that the band is done. Meiko claims that Taneda isn't acting like himself, pushing her boyfriend to finally speak his mind. Meiko's inaction has forced him into a corner, and he's unsure on how to proceed. She accuses him of lying, bringing up the things he said to her previously. With the words seeming to have an effect, the two make up before heading home. As they walk back together, Meiko silently apologizes. If Taneda is an asshole, then she's even worse. The afternoon slowly passes by, leading to a quiet moment shared between the couple. Taneda decides to go out for a bit, and when asked about his return, he casually answers back. The response doesn't hold up. After walking through the door, Taneda disappears. With almost an entire week passing, Meiko hasn't heard anything about his situation. Unable to call him as the days continue to pass, the weight of her loneliness gets heavier. Realizing that she never properly heard her boyfriend's music, she sits down and listens to the band's single, Solanin. Within the lyrics, Meiko hears just how bleak Taneda's current reality is. Saying goodbye to his aspirations, among other things, he'll never go back to being who he was. The place his mind wanders to is filled with melancholic recollections of useless memories. The lukewarm lifestyle is starting to deteriorate, and he needs to move on from it. The final lyrics appear to be especially forward, acting as a premature breakup message. Her friends come by to visit a little later, and it's through this that her thoughts start to clear up. Meiko understands why she got dumped, as she didn't make any real efforts to better herself or her situation. Before quitting her job, Meiko was worried that she would be trapped there indefinitely. While trying to move forward, she started to take Taneda for granted. Unable to make progress herself, the task fell to him to carry out. Pressured into what became a harsh failure, something finally gave way. Meiko's conflicting feelings complicate the issue even further. Ai encourages her to keep things going, and the next morning, a surprise phone call comes from Taneda. Finally getting a new phone to explain himself, it turns out that he went back to beg for his old job, resulting in him being stuck at the office as long as he was. Being a full-time employee now, he's become a so-called company man. However, he also says that he still wants to continue with the band. Having wanted to use music as a tool for impact, Taneda realized that he didn't need to push as hard as he thought. The fact that his friends and girlfriend were there was enough to get him by. He finally wants to start working properly to find a better future together with Meiko. They end on good terms, and Taneda drives off to meet the lover waiting for him at home. It seems that the former song lyrics held no hidden meanings after all. Everything is finally back on the right track. On the way, he states firmly that he's happy. Taneda may be ready to move on, but unfortunately for him, his time is up. Unexpectedly, Taneda gets struck by a passing vehicle. Lying motionless on the pavement, he stares up at the bright blue sky above him until his consciousness fades away. While this is already sad in its own right, what if I told you that this accident wasn't an accident? Up to this point, we've seen things through Meiko's eyes. Now, we're going to switch over to Taneda's perspective. Much like his girlfriend, he doesn't exactly have a clear direction he's aiming for. He does, however, have a dream. Being inspired to get into music when he was younger, his aim now is to play professionally. Waking up to reality, he's still a nobody stuck in his small apartment. While his university days are full of band practice and guitar playing, Taneda is fully aware of what's waiting for him after graduation. Everyone seems to be taking it in stride, yet he can't come to terms with it. Voicing his opinions to Meiko on the matter of her job choice results in a small fight, but he can't help finding a predictable future like this to be a drag. Before his last university performance, Taneda notices that other members of his music circle are also preparing for new jobs. When asked about his own plans, the young musician gives a basic answer, getting a slightly condescending response in return. Telling the band member off, it's clear that Taneda is getting tired of watching people around him conforming to a boring way of life. He starts to have doubts about his time in the band, leading him to question himself and his motives. With his music beginning to feel like nothing more than empty expression, he gets on stage, annoyed with his lack of answers. The band kicks things off, but Taneda forgets his song lyrics. Improvising on the fly, he instead decides to give a speech. He fully speaks his mind, not holding any of his frustration back. The musician concludes with a solemn request to cling to his independence for just a little longer. Moving a few years into the future, Taneda has taken a part-time illustration job for a newspaper subcontract company. His reason for taking the work is somewhat flimsy, settling for something reasonable to suit his needs. Despite having the ability, he's fully aware that the job is anything but glamorous. Internally, Taneda has been wandering since those early university days. Regardless of what he tries, there doesn't appear to be a way out of this life-sucking maze. Guitar bass on his back, the dream he carries continues to weigh down on him. When a spirit from his inner forest offers him two life choices, he can't help but feel that something is missing. Having no time to choose, Taneda doesn't receive either option. Snapping out of this dream state, he's left to think about what he saw. The musician is essentially coasting through life, not wanting to get involved with anything too serious. He's scared of the consequences that come with pushing too hard, fearing results that don't allow for retreat. Meiko wants him to make a serious attempt at professional music, but Taneda isn't even sure if it's what he really wants. With a melancholic expression, Taneda remarks how he's gotten older. Trying to make sense of his conflicting thoughts, his inner selves voice their opinions. No one can agree on anything, resulting in a predictable outcome. With time against him, and his girlfriend's words still lingering, he decides to give his music a real chance. However, this endeavor is going to be all or nothing. Whatever happens, this is his only shot. Taneda comes out of the gate running, working hard and making sure the other members do too. Having quit his job, he's fully focused on his goal. Like Meiko said previously, Taneda is now properly taking steps to build a potential future. Getting the ever-important call soon after, Taneda is given a proposition. While it's not quite what he expected, it seems that he's at least considering the offer. He lifts his head up to say something, but Meiko cuts him off prematurely. This leaves Taneda noticeably shocked, and we never hear what he had attempted to say. While the other two wait downstairs, the lone musician uses the bathroom. It's here that he runs into the man who called them in. Taneda recognizes him from an old band he used to love, remarking how he still has all their CDs. Mentioning him being an inspiration for Taneda getting into music in the first place, he now wonders what he's been up to. Shying away from the spotlight, the man decided to make a change for himself. Taneda accuses him of valuing money over everything else, but this isn't the case. He simply discovered something else worth protecting. Still fighting his own battles, the former musician leaves Taneda with some parting words. Washing his face, the young man reaches for some cash to pay for a hand towel. Sitting next to his wallet is the little parachute toy he caught during that hopeful night on the beach. Looking out a nearby window, he wonders what would have happened if he had had the chance to speak during the meeting. From an outside perspective, I think the older man's words ring true here. If Taneda had decided to accept the offer, it's true that he wouldn't be the center of attention. That said, he would have gained a few things in return. Having time both on and off stage to play music, he could have refined his style and gotten a lot of valuable experience. Being paid for his performances, he could use the money for better equipment, savings, and keeping himself stable. Getting his foot in the door of the business side of music, his reputation and new connections could springboard him into great new opportunities. Taking that first step, Taneda would still be fighting in his own way to pursue his goal. Unfortunately, the chance was shut down in pursuit of the band jumping straight to the finish line. Granted, you never know what could happen in a situation like this. Still, given how competitive the music scene is, it's not the worst idea to consider. Regardless, Taneda heads back down after taking a bit of time for himself. Meiko comments on an ominous feeling she has, and Taneda watches as his dream slowly floats away. Following the breakup talk and disappearance, Taneda finally gets the chance to call Meiko after working his ass off. Saying what he needs to before his phone dies, the young man heads out. Driving home, Taneda states that he's happy. A small question nags at him, but he reaffirms his stance. This time, a creature from his inner forest asks the question, and the result is much different. Taneda can't take it anymore, finally breaking down. He tried his hardest, but he still ended up being trapped in a shitty situation. At this point, he's had enough. He punches the throttle, speeding through a red light. We're now back to the present with the full story. As Taneda looks up at the sky, he remarks to himself that it's time to go home. 2 months have gone by since the unfortunate passing of Taneda. Meiko has since gotten a job at a flower shop for no particular reason. She still comes back to the same apartment complex at the end of every day. Her friends make their usual rounds to hang out and check up on her. After spending some time together, they head out and leave Meiko to be alone. While things come across as relatively normal, it doesn't take long for them to break down. Meiko is still devastated about losing her lover, and the friends closest to him share similar feelings. With no signs of stopping, the sadness continues to hang overhead. Meiko is plagued with what-if scenarios, blaming herself for what happened to Taneda. It eats away at her to the point of throwing her TV across the room, which Billy happens to hear outside her door. He rushes in, seeing a fresh injury on her face. Billy is frantic, trying in vain to get some answers out of his friend. Meiko begs him to be left alone, and he reluctantly agrees. He pleads for her to recover soon, because watching this is too much for him. Driving back home, a number of thoughts run through his head, and Billy wonders what their next move is. Taneda's dad comes to visit Meiko briefly, who remarks on just how similar the father and son are. He notices the guitar sitting nearby, reminding him of Taneda's high school days. The two seriously fought over whether he could pursue music after graduating. His dad ended up giving him an ultimatum. He could play music after going to college, but if he still chose to seriously work at it, don't stop. After this conversation, Meiko apologizes, still feeling responsible for the current reality, but Taneda's dad reassures her that she isn't. Before the couple's breakup discussion, Taneda had talked to his parents about coming home. Then, roughly 5 days before his bike crash, he called back to say that he was going to stay in Tokyo after all. What most likely happened is after leaving the apartment to sort his thoughts, he used an external phone to notify his parents, then quickly begged for his job back. Before Taneda's father heads out, he leaves her with some noteworthy parting words. If she still feels responsible for everything, then he wants her to remember Taneda. If anyone can prove that he was alive, it's her. With these things lingering in her thoughts, her eyes fall on the guitar sitting by the window. Holding it in her hands, an idea begins to take form. Meeting the two former band members later on, they're shocked to hear that Meiko wants to join the band. She doesn't know how to play guitar yet, but this is something she really wants to do. Met with some daunting words from her friends, she remains determined to make it work. Learning things on the fly, she plays her first chord, leaving the other two stunned. For a split second, she sounded very similar to someone else. Spending the day jamming out together, the verdict is in. Meiko still has a lot of work to do. Despite this, the guys want to give it a shot. With everyone in agreement, the group gets to work. Later, Kato gets reunited with a younger member of his university's band circle. Earlier in the story, she joins as a new member and later gets encouraged by Kato to pursue her own music. She tried her luck, resulting in a record label signing them that same year. After they catch up for a bit, she asks for a favor. The label will be coming to their band's next performance, and they need other people to play alongside them. Asking how much time there is before the date, Kato is told that the show is only 1 month from now. With roughly a half hour of playtime, this gives them enough for a 3-song performance. Even though the deadline is quite harsh for a beginner, Meiko wants to do it. While she's definitely motivated, she understandably has a hard time picking up the proper techniques. Looking for something easier to learn from, she accidentally comes across Taneda's old diary. Finding what he wrote the day he walked out, it seems this is when he found the answer that he was looking for. Seeing the early lyrics of Solanin also written on the pages, Meiko has a realization. Initially, it felt like a breakup song, but now it feels more like someone starting over. Feeling more encouraged now, she continues to learn the tricky instrument. With all the effort she's put in, the results are starting to show during practice. Walking home one night, Meiko is amazed at what she's managed to accomplish. In the middle of this preparation, she's confessed to by a work friend who reminds her a great deal of Taneda. While it's a nice gesture, she declines the new relationship, knowing it's a place she can't revisit. The next day, Meiko takes an old acoustic guitar and grabs a train for Shinjuku. Her intention is to practice in front of people, but before she knows it, the massive presence of the town practically swallows her. Compared to her past self that was fighting each day to survive, the current Meiko feels powerless. With those earlier days gone, she knows that things need to change. She ends up coming home without playing anything, but a familiar-looking kid has taken an interest in her. Asking about a possible performance, the young boy encourages her to play. She finally manages to get some public practice in, and silently thinks something might change if she can pull this show off. Before the last practice session, Billy asks Meiko if she's doing alright. She tells him she's not, but wants to do her best to move on. Billy has a few harsh things of his own to say, but they're followed up with some solemn words. Even though he's mad at the circumstances, he still can't help but miss his friend. Declaring today to be the last day for tears, the two quietly take some time to get the remaining sadness out. The two head off to practice, and Mako is thankful for what Billy did. The day of the concert finally arrives, with light anxiety taking hold of the band members. Talking with Mako a bit before going on stage, Billy brings up the previous questions she asked after initially quitting her job. His late answer is that regardless of all the things you have to put up with, being able to live life in general is worthwhile. The two are then introduced to the guy visiting from the record label. Oddly enough, it's a face they've seen before. It turns out that he's now on his own journey to discover music he believes in. Somehow, Taneda's previous conversation changed something within him, and the man gives his best regards to the former musician. With that, it's time for the band to hit the stage. Hyping each other up, they're ready to put all their practice to the test. Supported from behind, Mako steels herself and starts the performance. The three put on a hell of a show, and despite her inexperience, Mako pushes forward. Reaching the final song of the set, she doesn't make any mistakes on Solanin. Before the ending, Mako makes a promise to herself. Once they finish here, she's going to start over again from the beginning. The last of the notes carry through the crowd, bringing the song to its conclusion. The band gave it everything they had, but more than that, they've finally gotten a bit of closure. The final chapter takes place 6 months after the concert. Everyone has gotten busier with their lives, and the band still gets together to practice a few times a month. Mako has more recently made a sizable change in her life. Accepting a new work position, as well as wanting a smaller place for herself, she makes the decision to move to a new apartment closer to the job. Billy asks Mako if she's going to stick with her job this time, even if things get hard. Answering frankly, she promises she'll do her best with it. With all the boxes and furniture finally packed up, the only thing left is Taneda's guitar. Slightly anxious, but looking forward to the future, she hugs the instrument close, giving her last goodbyes to the old place. Leaving alongside her friends, she enjoys the relaxing summer weather. Even if she won't always be able to enjoy this nice environment, as long as her friends are with her, Mako will be alright. Looking into the distance, she takes her first real step towards a new life. While this concludes the main story, there are still a few additional pieces that come after this. In 2010, an art book known as ctrl+t was released. Inside, you'd find plenty of original drawn pieces, a colored chapter of Goodnight Pun Pun, a few interviews, and some other material. The most noteworthy section featured the inclusion of 2 one-shots, one of them taking place in the universe of Solanin. This side story is called Haru Yokoi, or Awaiting Spring if you prefer. Here, we're met with 2 new characters that we later find out to be a couple that recently split up. The young woman has been wanting to find a place in the area, and to be nice, her ex comes along to help with the process. Looking around the old apartment, the landlord notes how the previous tenant was also a female business worker. Getting used to the room in her own way, the girl notices a leftover guitar pick resting on the floor. She takes a guess at the circumstances surrounding the old residence, actually managing to come somewhat close. The former lover inquires about the end result of the relationship. The woman assumes that the 2 individuals have most likely figured something else out. After all, things eventually have to change. Getting ready to leave, the ex-boyfriend isn't quite ready to give up on their own relationship, but the girl has already accepted the situation. He leaves with a smile, to which the girl responds sheepishly. Immediately after, she curls up, painfully thinking about her selfishness. Eventually, she gets herself up and heads home to her new apartment. This small story does a good job at portraying 2 important things. Firstly, everyone has their own circumstances and live independently of each other. Life goes on regardless of what happens. While Mako is off doing her own thing, this girl is busy with her own problems, and neither one has any idea of the other. Regardless of this, they both would most likely agree on certain things. The second thing worth noting has to do with connections. While it's true that most people will never end up interacting with each other, there are still chances of being influenced without realizing it. Mako had a rough journey in her previous apartment, leading this new girl to pick up some of the pieces. While we all have our own agendas to worry about, it's interesting to occasionally see these glimpses into the lives of others. The artbook's title also lends to these themes, being a computer shortcut that opens a new tab in a web browser. Regardless of where you are or what you're doing, it's never too late to start over. The final part of this story is an epilogue chapter that was published in 2017, grouped together with a color reprint of the manga in Japan. We're reintroduced to Meiko, seeing her again for the first time since the original series ended. Currently in her 30s, a number of things have changed since those early days. At the moment, she's living in a different place with a different boyfriend. She still talks to her old friends, but the topics are more adult in nature. Bringing up the idea of quitting her current job, it seems that Meiko is still the same in certain areas. Accidentally almost walking out into traffic, we get a potential reference to Taneda's unfortunate events. The two remark how things seem to be going well, managing to work out in the end. Meiko also drops the news that she's having a baby, making the earlier job discussion more understandable. Before parting ways, her friend remarks that she's happy for Meiko. Heading to a nearby venue, Meiko watches her old friends play on stage. The two recognize her in the crowd, and without hesitation, they energetically start playing a song, with the most likely choice being Solanin. As she hears the music, Meiko gets reminded of something. She remembers her previous thought about the demon lurking in Tokyo, and wondered what exactly it was she had been fighting against. She may have lost, but there's something new that's precious to her now. Despite the boring everyday life she has, there are things that make it worthwhile. Recalling the lyrics of Solanin, she knows she can't return to how things were. Regardless, having come this far, she'll keep moving forward. With one final nod to Taneda, the manga draws to a close. Solanin is an amazing story to me, but it's a bit deceiving in the way it's executed. There's a certain interview that was conducted with Asano after the completion of Goodnight Pun Pun. In it, he talks briefly about Solanin and how it was considered a feel-good story. What's interesting about this is Asano himself doesn't really think it is. While it does present things in a slightly positive way, he mentions that it only leaves off on a good note. This is true for both the original manga and the epilogue chapter. Still, I know what he's getting at, because personally, it feels like a very melancholic series. In another interview, Asano talks about the story being themed around the idea that younger people feel they're inherently special in some way, followed by them adapting to how society works. Framing it that way, the story has a much more sullen undertone. It's also interesting that Asano considered a story like this to be more boring and restrictive. Preparing for his next serialization early, this might be why he sneaks Pun Pun into one of the more serious scenes. Nevertheless, I still think this series has a lot of important things to say. This isn't a series that shows happy people getting great jobs and accomplishing things with little effort. Conversely, the people in this manga are far more normal, not simply achieving success because the story wills it. We're shown how hard life can be due to realistic factors. If you don't know what you want to do with your life, what steps should you take to figure that out? If you want to do something, but get trapped with a bad job, how can you break free of that situation? Are some dreams more valuable than others? Can you accomplish anything while going through the motions? All of these questions are indirectly asked by the characters, and a lot of readers have most likely asked them as well. As for myself, I relate very heavily to this story. In fact, I've been dangerously close to ending up like Taneda. I've been stuck with boring average jobs while learning to take on adult responsibilities. I've taken time away from work to figure things out, only to end up right back to where I started. I've run out of money, wondering what the hell I could even do anymore. So ultimately, what's the right answer? Honestly, I don't know, and I doubt anyone else does either. Still, I do think there's some truth to the lyrics of Solanin. You shouldn't worry about a past that you can't go back to. A certain alchemist would know this best. Stand up and walk. Keep moving forward. You've got 2 good legs, so get up and use them. You're strong enough to make your own path. That said, if something interests you, I think you owe it to yourself to at least try for it, even conservatively. Whether it takes a week, a month, a year, it doesn't matter. Your path is yours. If something you've been working on just isn't coming together, don't be afraid to make a change. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back for a bit to reflect. If you don't have anything you can call your own right now, then just take it one day at a time. Wander for long enough, and you'd be surprised where you can end up. And hey, regular life ain't so bad either. There's always something to appreciate. You just have to look for it. Don't forget to enjoy the little things. Sometimes it can make all the difference. Being an adult is a real challenge sometimes, but I'm going to keep fighting my battle, and I hope you will too. Hey there, if you made it to the end, thanks a lot for watching. I really do love this story, and hopefully my breakdown made it enjoyable to some degree. All of the books mentioned are openly available to buy, though if you want to get your hands on a physical copy of the Epilogue, you'd better be willing to shell out some serious cash. Either way, feel free to check these out for yourself if they sound interesting. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Peace, guys.